I think two ironies going on today. The first is that we're a TV station that can't get a TV to work. And the other, as we to me, is that we're really talking about the role of child abuse pediatricians in part, and we are in, they're often referred to as CAPS, and we are in CAP 123. So we've got two little months away. I did want to give some updates for people who maybe don't know. Um, about 2 years ago, I would say that it's okay. I would say about 2 years ago, there really wasn't anyone in Georgia that had this in the forefront of their radar as a collective issue. This is really isolated with parents, none of whom are here today, kind of going through this individually. And so in that time, I think it's worth just going and acknowledging the fact that now we have a national organization, You Are the Power, that has come in and really put a focus on Georgia, that has provided really a support system for a lot of the families that are here in Georgia and are experiencing this issue. So that's a win. We have a policy that was written by DFACS to try to take a look at this issue and alter the way these cases are handled. We have a bill that was introduced yesterday by Senator Brass that also attempts to tackle a part of this issue. So really, if you go from where we were 2 years ago to where we are today, I mean, I think the fact that we've got a footing to have a conversation with lawmakers and a footing to have a conversation with DFACS, those are wins that everyone who's been a part of raising awareness and fighting this issue should really be proud of. I know that there are a lot of steps that many people in the room want to continue to take on this issue, but it all starts with the foundation. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here. And I know that there have been a lot of comments on social media and even to me in person, thanking me and 11 Alive for our role in raising awareness on this issue. But really, completely, the credit goes to the families that stood up, that spoke up, because talking about this issue, I can't imagine it was easy. Putting yourself out to the public to judge you, to determine whether they really think that you were guilty of abuse, and to make the comments that they were going to choose to make on social media and in their own social circles could not have been easy. And so really this credit of any of the road that we have made on this issue falls upon you guys, the families that were living when I called to say yes. And it's also the thank you to the families that maybe weren't in a position or a place to talk on camera, but were willing to talk to me behind the scenes and were willing to give me the insight and information of what was going on in your case so that we could continue to build the trends and build awareness on what was going on. Because not having lived this myself, I was learning all of this from scratch. And my boss came to me and said, I need you to find me at least 3 people so that we can show that this is more than just one situation. And we ended up finding 24 within a matter of 2 weeks. So again, my heartfelt thanks just goes out to all of you for the fight you guys continue to have. So we were hoping to play a little bit of our series first and then do a Q&A discussion after, but due to the aforementioned technical difficulties, which are being resolved, we're going to go ahead and do the Q&A first. And that might seem a little out of order because the information we really wanted to discuss sort of assumes that you already know all this. But looking around the crowd, I'm pretty sure you guys have all seen it anyway, and you know all that. We do hope you'll stick around afterwards to watch some of it even after our Q&A discussion. But this is being recorded. It is being streamed, I believe, on You Are the Power's Facebook. And as well as we're recording the discussion so that we can put it on 11 Alive Plus on our streaming. So if you know people who aren't able to come, if you know lawmakers who are going to have to be voted on this bill as it moves through the process, if you feel that there's a part of this discussion that's beneficial, now is the time to let them know what you think of these things and to tag and share any of this material that would be beneficial for them to keep in mind. So I'm going to start with Kelly. Come on up here. Everyone say hi to Kelly. From the group, right? Okay. I'm going to give you this mic. That's yours. And Kelly, I know that we are assuming that people already know what the health department is. And
just so that we have it kind of as the background, since we're not able to see the programming first. I consider the Health That Harms, the title that we gave it, the roadblocks that makes it difficult for parents to prove their innocence after being accused by a doctor of abuse. It is the costly court fight, the lack of awareness that there could be a medical condition behind the injuries. That is to me what I designate as the Health That Harms. And I was asked when I started this series to kind of write a little blog about why I was doing it. And I was looking at that earlier today. And the last line that I wrote, I think still holds really, really true. And I wrote, it seems if we really want to protect children and keep families together, we have to be passionate parties to the truth, not blocking it, but finding it. And I think that that's what all of these efforts that have been made in the past few weeks and months have been about, being passionate parties to the truth. So knowing that you walked this road, you were on the other side of it, your children are back home. Talk to me a little bit about the impact that this has had on your family, because it's not just proving that you did abuse your children. Even when they come home, there are the impacts now that your family is like to do. Talk to me about that.
So, just briefly, 2019, my husband and I had twins, Mila and Benjamin. We already have a 19-month-old named Nicholas. We brought him to Chella. We were falsely accused of child abuse. And they were put into a foreign home for 20 months. And 5 words, there's probably a lot more, but destructive. It broke up our family dynamic very quickly. Disruptive, ruined what we were trying to build as a family, which was a strong bond, which I will say very proudly never broke and only got stronger. Traumatizing, it made my husband Carlos and I believe we were irrelevant because we didn't have a say in how frequent we could see our children nor care for them. Detrimental, our children's mental, physical, emotional health deteriorated because they weren't in our care or that of our family. And also fearful, the constant worrying, even to this day, and they were out of our care of our children in a foreign home, and then the persistent shifts within the courts and uncertainty of whether we would ever get them back. So they are thriving. They have been home with us for 3 years and are really doing amazing. They were not thriving when they were out of our care for 20 months. It took them 20 months to come home. It took another year to close the juvenile case and 5 years to close the criminal case.
What do you feel were the challenges in your case or the roadblocks that were put up that made this take so long?
So the first one is the juvenile courts, the inability to see and believe any other explanation out of Cho's abuse claim. They only saw one doctor and said that that was facts. And I would have to say defects as well. Their inability to see and be open-minded that there was an actual medical diagnosis for my child. And then also service providers continuing to side with my husband and I and referencing how well fit we were at parenting. So it got the juvenile judge as well as DFACS wanted us to be painted as bad parents, but because they were never painting us as bad parents, they kept punting and just punting and punting. Then I would have to say our criminal arrest. Following the testimony of our medical expert who countered the child abuse claim, we were arrested by the SWAT and fugitive team 10 months after the allegations. So the pending charges allowed the juvenile court to continue the claims that Carlos and I were being unfit. And it also became a barrier for reunification because of the bondage, which we had to go back in front of the judge twice just to get modified. And then the biggest one is Carlos and I were never going to admit to the abuse claim. Even though they wanted us to admit to something we did not do, we stand with our morals and our values, and we did not accept it. Thank you.
We'll have an opportunity. Is there any other questions that you guys have that you want to ask the individuals who've agreed to kind of be on our panel, we'll let you ask those at the end, but I want to give a chance for some initial questions up front. This is Doris Good. Doris is a attorney who has represented and represents some of the individuals in this room. When I needed to find someone who would talk to me about this, it couldn't just be parents, because you can imagine from the public perception, of course, the parents are going to say that they didn't abuse their kids. So I needed someone who was coming from a different perspective, like a more neutral perspective, who could talk to me more holistically about what they were seeing and kind of add some credibility to the narrative that these parents were giving. And Doris was wholeheartedly willing to step up and talk with me. So again, very, very grateful for you. So I know we discussed some questions beforehand. The first one is, when you have made a request on behalf of your client for independent medical testing, what has been the state's reaction?
No.
Just
It's flat out no. I finally had one county that said yes, which I think is because a lot of you are the power people in this room who finally got that done. But it's specifically no. Nor can we, and not just can we have a doctor look at the medical records. It's can we get the medical records? Can we have someone else physically examine the child? It's a big no. I usually have to get a separate court order to do that.
So do you feel that with the policy change that was made, and perhaps even to some extent, the bill that was introduced, that this might help?
Yes, I think that as long as the policy change trickles down to the counties, because we've always had a difficult time, we'll make a huge change. Because then parents won't feel like they can't go and get it. They can point to the policy, they can point to the bill. My only concern with that second opinion is majority of our folks are indigent. And so to be able to forward to go out and pay for experts is a whole another story for them, a whole different world.
And when you do get that no, how long does it take as you go through the legal system to fight and get that court order that might allow the yes?
I'd say on average 30 days.
So that's another month that these children are separated, or that any different situation. What do you think would be improvements to our system that do protect potentially abused children, but also allow parents faster due process to get to the bottom of their child's injury?
Well, I think that there has to be an open-mindedness from when these cases first come in. It's, guilty until proven innocent. And I think if we all, and mainly talking DFACs, I do criminal cases on this issue, but most of mine are DFACs, is that we don't get to know the family. There's a social aspect to this family, and you start to get to know the families and you're like, wait, this doesn't seem like the type of family. And not that there is a type of family, but for us, it's a lot of getting to know them and their personalities and their extended family and the other kids and all this types of things. So I would want DFACs in particular to take a broader picture of that family and get to know the family before we start making accusations. Because the minute they make accusations, the parents are turned off. They're not going to cooperate. They're not going to feel like I have any luck or hope of changing this.
And you are in private practice, so you get to choose your clients for the most part. I mean,
Yes.
you do some public tests as well. So, but you take families in private practice that you do believe are innocent of abuse. What documentation or information are you getting that makes you feel that way, that might be different than what DFACs is getting or the child abuse pediatrician is getting? And you kind of alluded to it in the last answer.
Yeah, I think that what we're getting is when children's child abuse pediatricians make the determination of child abuse, the only thing that they are making it on is the records they have produced in the hospital within a 4-hour to 6-hour time period. We actually get prenatal records, birth records, pediatric records, specialty records. And the birth records, we get both mom and the child. So we're looking at a whole history Because in a lot of these cases, we'll have abnormal lab results, which is the first kind of trigger, like maybe there's a condition here. And to kind of follow those back to see where that came from.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now I want to introduce Tom Rollins. Tom comes to us with, I always like to say, sort of this very holistic perspective, being an attorney who's dealt with some of these types of cases as well, but also serving as the director of DFACS. And so he kind of walked in many different shoes on this issue. And one of the stories we are not showing today, not for any specific reason other than just the nature of what we wanted to make sure we were able to present today. Tom is in one of our stories, and that is not one that we're going to be seeing today. So it's great that he's here to speak with us. And I do want to go ahead and give the opportunity for you to say, there is, in your view, a value to these child abuse pediatricians.
Yeah, sure. So, Rebecca, as you know, I've been a judge overseeing these cases. I've been the state child advocate. So I've heard from parents who have these kind of concerns that they weren't getting a fair shake. I have represented parents who were accused of serious child abuse, and of course, I've been the head of the agency. And I think what you and I have always discussed about this is that, there is a role, and there's a need in society for trained professional medical doctors who can say, yes, I am concerned about this child's symptoms. This appears to be consistent with abuse. I think one of the things that Grace kind of pointed out is the problem, is that we all have a tendency to have confirmation bias. And when there is a pronouncement by a doctor that this abuse occurred, I think in the past we've seen the agency tend to say, that's it. And so one of the things I'm really happy about this particular bill, as well as certainly the policy change, is that the folks in the room are never going to trust the child protective system unless it is perceived as being fair. And that is a critical thing because we want people to trust that system. We want it to be fair. We want to make sure there's due process. And so making sure that if there is a diagnosis, that is simply a medical diagnosis, that you have the opportunity to get a second opinion, not only of paper, but actually have that child examined by an independent physician. That's very important. And following up on what Grace said, I believe that in indigent cases, the courts are going to have the obligation to pay for those. I've been successful in getting a court order to pay for an independent medical evaluation in a case like this. But I really do think that this is the way to go in the future. Yes, there are children who are severely abused by parents. A lot of times that becomes unfortunately obvious when you hear the story versus the symptoms. But we have also seen situations in which the parents said, I truly didn't do anything. I don't know what's going on here. And we have not always given them the due process that they deserve, the access to the resources they deserve, to make sure that we know the truth, not just with the diagnosis, but know the actual truth of what happened or did not happen.
Do you feel like people were even talking about this a few years ago? And was this something that people were really acknowledging could be a problem?
Well, I think there's been two things. I think there's sort of been, on the one hand, remember child abuse pediatrics has been a growing field in the last few years. There have been both questions raised as to whether or not doctors were well trained in actually identifying abuse. And that was a lot of what I've worked with over the years. But I think in more recent years, we've seen situations in which doctors have been rightly faulted for confirmation bias. And so this, I think, as you know, this has been raised in cases in Michigan over the last few years, in Alaska, in Texas. They really focus on this issue. And I think everyone involved sees this as an issue of ensuring fairness for families, so that we can know the truth of what's occurring in children.
Why do you think the child abuse pediatricians have such an outsized voice in these cases?
Because they're experts. My father was a small town doctor, and I like to think that everybody was. I mean, truth in our society, doctors carry great weight. They are well educated. Doctors' opinions are, they're doctors. And so we have to give them that respect that they're due. But at the same time, that should not be the end of our inquiry. Our job in child welfare and child protection, whether you're a judge, an attorney, an attorney for defects, or a parent's attorney, child's attorney, is to ensure that there is a thorough and sifting examination of the facts so that you at least come as close to the truth. Don't always get, but come at least close to the truth as possible.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to give you a few moments. If there's anyone who's here who has a question that they want to ask of either of our three panelists, knowing that, I know there's a lot of emotions and opinions in the room, but if anyone does have just a question.
I would like to make a statement to continue what they're saying. My name is Tammy Renner. I'm a nurse and a mom from Georgia. Not only do I work in the pediatric industry here, but also my husband and I, don't know if he's in the room because we actually have written a book and we have 3 first editions for everybody, which was only part of our journey. But I'm here. Our daughter is doing well. Her name is Emma, and we have been through a very difficult time. And I'm going to add to, I think the attorney here said the first step to due process is ensuring cases. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I'm going to go a step further than he did and say the first step to due process is ensuring cases aren't referred to defects prior to ensuring there are no medical explanations. I can't tell you, for sure it's fractured even in CHOA. It's easy to say CHOA is one big industry or one big hospital and all the doctors in here on the same level. That is true for basic care. If you have a strep infection, yes, you need a strep test. But there are other conditions too, of which my daughter had, that where information was withheld from us. Where I had to care for a child who was spiraling down. Our lives we were losing our lives. Didn't know what to do. We were turned into defects. We were treated in the community as though we were making things up. And one of the conditions, if anyone's seen the Take Care of My Netflix movie, my daughter's secondary condition that presented or was identified first at CHOA was the same condition. And it happened around the same time. And we were treated a lot of the same way. I see some of the caregivers. If I don't know the answer, it's the parent. Wrong. You don't know the answer. You need to disclose that. Please don't cause additional harm to these families. And it's happening. So I won't go through it all, but I will tell you, thanks to 11 Alive, y'all did a piece in April about PANS or PANDAS. My daughter was finally diagnosed with that. I will tell you this again. It made me, I already knew because I'd written the book where the department head of Emory Pediatrics had written that he didn't believe the condition exists. No parent cares what the condition's called. What I do care about is that my daughter, whose life was very poor for 9 years, that treatment saved her life. And what did I have to do? I had to go to CHOP in Philadelphia to get her treated for her pain condition so that she was treated correctly and not placed on medication she didn't need and not placed in a mental health facility. And then I had to go to Cincinnati Children's to get the IVIG, which she now gets today, and to allow her to have the quality of life that she deserves. So there's a lot wrong here, and I so appreciate all your efforts to bring attention to all this, because some of these families should never, ever be turned into defects, certainly not by one doctor who has a suspicion that something is wrong. That is not enough to turn someone into care.
And we do have an update that Caitlin is doing right now on campus. So that'll be coming up. Are there any actual questions?
Suggestion.
First of all, I would like to, my name is Shanita Benz. I am a Georgia native, civil rights activist, and also a part of an impacted family with Kalia and Kobe Brickman. I would like to, I didn't read the bill, I didn't know about the bill that was just passed yesterday, so I.
Not passed, just introduced.
I read it yesterday,
We have a long way to go. Let's do that.
and I think it was Senator Bass. Thank him for doing that, I do want to read that, and I will be reading that bill. But I think we should maybe introduce something like what they have in other counties, maybe like a citizen review board, before those charges are indictments. Let's regular citizens, like us, review those, I think that's just a suggestion that, we should start to implement for our different counties and our various counties that we represent.
And I know that you said before that this might just be the beginning. But all these ideas and suggestions, now there's a foot in for those conversations. to happen. Well, if there aren't any specific questions, I think we'll let our technical team hop in, take a minute or two, get this finally set up. Those who would like to stay and watch some of it, please do. If you need to go, we understand as well. We just thank you guys for being here today.
Situation. But it should be expected based on a specific basis.
Am I gonna be your shots for the camera?
Probably. Maybe a little closer. I'm gonna turn this light off.
There should be.
I want some of that. I mean,
There should be more.
yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
My next one.
He was checking his there. Yeah.
So she gets started. It's called Help Right Marks.
I mean,
Yesterday, it's.
guilty of abuse your son.
What do you do when there are no witnesses? When the child injuries. Did the two 14 for the she's over to them. What do you do when there are no
You gotta shut up.
witnesses? When the child injuries.
Ashley,
Baby, an infant who can't tell us what happened.
We're barely making it.
We did nothing to hide anything.
there's no winning for these parents.
You're about to hear from 10 Georgia families who took their children to the hospital for help with unexplained medical injuries. They left without them, accused of abuse.
We asked for second opinions. They come back with that test isn't needed.
I no longer thought that I was worthy of my children.
It makes sense that child welfare got involved, but it is what happens next that is raising concerns and has Georgia families begging lawmakers to get involved. Baby bottles, a crib, and toys. It is a house frozen in time. This father's two girls are gone.
What's it like to go to sleep in this house?
It's lonely.
Not even Matt Hernandez's wife, Tucky, is living here. In fact, these parents haven't been together with their children in nearly 10 months.
Why?
Our bond conditions don't allow us to have contact with each other.
Bond conditions, as in criminal charges, and not just against him, against his wife as well.
2 counts of first-degree child abuse and 2 counts of aggravated assault.
That's why even though his 4-year-old daughter Aria loves to spin and twirl as he plays guitar, the dance floor today is empty.
You know, we love these girls so much. And the state has just from day one seemed to be set on ripping us apart.
It started when Tucky noticed Emma had a swollen leg. They took her to their pediatrician, who referred them to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
We did nothing to hide anything.
It was there they also shoved up earlier behind the newborn's ear. They answered questions without hesitation, unaware they were talking to a child abuse pediatrician, or CAP, who already suspected abuse after seeing Emma's x-rays.
It was some healed ribs and some fractures on her femur and tibia.
Fractures that to the CAP could only mean abuse. A parent who has abused their child isn't likely to admit it. But what's interesting is that Emma's injuries didn't magically stop when her parents lost custody. First, she went to live with her aunt and uncle.
About 5 weeks in, we woke her up one morning and she had a strange bruising discoloration on her feet and one of her ankles.
Defects accused them of letting the mother, Tucky, sneak over to again abuse the baby.
No, we completely been doing everything by the book.
Still, the girls were removed, but the marks kept showing up at her foster home and daycare. Jonathan and Jennifer Williams started raising their own questions about Emma's health when defects asked them to watch the girls for a few days.
So I was concerned about some of the physical things of Emma, just how she held herself, her little skull seemed kind of sunken into me.
They told the juvenile court judge they believed Emma had an undiagnosed health problem and were shocked by the testimony defending defects' decision to instead put the girls in state custody for abuse.
I saw nothing presented as evidence that indicated this family had hurt their child at all.
They were treating this family like they were criminals. They were treating them with zero respect.
The state no longer uses the Williams to care for foster children. Almost a year later, Emma's new caregiver says something is still not right.
because she's under the office care, she's under medicated, so we kind of have to follow these guidelines. So I'm like, can I take her to, different doctor myself? I'll pay for it, like, we need to figure this out because it's bothering me. Because I don't want to be able to fix whatever's going on in her situation.
Court records show no one disputes the x-rays revealed injuries to Emma's bones. That Tucky's vitamin D levels were low during pregnancy, or that Emma's levels were low when she came into the hospital. But doctors do disagree on the cause of those fractures and the impact of that vitamin D deficiency.
It seems like entire cases hinge on this one child abuse pediatrician saying this is abuse.
Doctors have figured out why she gets those bruise-like marks, and it has nothing to do with abuse. Emma's parents want genetic testing to rule out any other illnesses that could have weakened her bones. You offered to pay for it.
Offered to pay for it.
6 months after the girls were removed, the court agreed to the testing, but it is a process that can take months. Meanwhile, this family functions in fragments. Each week, a few hours. Supervised visits, first with mom and later with dad.
To keep my wife and I, who have been married since 2012, separated for so long, is just cruel. To know that they're tormenting a 4-year-old child and just to continue to push through it is just cruel.
Okay, we're gonna reboot my computer, so we don't keep having an error message pop up, but I'm gonna put Matt and Tucky on the stand, if you don't mind for just a second. Obviously, there have been some updates since this case, or since our story stands now, and what has happened since we did this interview.
Thankfully, the girls are with their uncle. It took a long time and a lot of fighting to make that happen, but they're finally safe. We have 4 or 5 different expert doctors and reports at this point, but not that the state seems to really care.
You guys are now
It's been
able
very hard.
to live together.
Yeah, Tucky's back home, but it's still basically impossible to explain to Aria why she can't come home. And we just want to be a part of our children's lives, and the state refuses to allow that.
And your trial is upcoming.
It's set for May 5th at the moment.
Where does the juvenile court case stand?
When the aunt and uncle were given permanent guardianship, that was closed out. So luckily, we do not need to go back to juvenile court until we request to have custody given back to us.
So now, at this point, it is the criminal charges that you are facing that trial, and then
It's almost identical to what Kelly said. I mean, it's the criminal charges that were put against us that have stopped the state from reunifying our family and allowed them to keep these girls in their custody for as long as they were able to do so.
all right. Thank you. And I will say that Matt and his wife, in a roundabout way, because at the time they weren't allowed to be together or even communicate with each other. So we interviewed Matt first, but he was the first to step up and say, let me share my story, and helped us begin this entire series. And that's why we wanted to honor that by starting off today. We're going to continue to play this and hope that that little message doesn't pop up anymore. Let's sit down to motion. This is Casey and Bailey Collins and their son, Ridge. She is an advanced EMT, so she knows what to do in an emergency. Still,
You're not prepared and trained to use life-saving skills in your child.
August 2023, Ridge stopped breathing and he was life-flighted to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. It was there that a child abuse pediatrician determined someone had violently shaken him, causing his brain to bleed. His father, Casey, was the prime suspect.
You cried.
I did.
You immediately cried.
Um,
You lost it.
and then they can point at me and say he had to have done it. It's kind of heart wrenching to hear, especially on the stand when you're in court.
Georgia's Department of Family and Children's Services removed custody, and the parents were arrested.
I just remember holding Bridge and telling him that I'm so sorry. That I wish I could take him with me. And I had no choice but to leave him.
All right, I know we said no emotion, but Bailey's heartache is also fact. Even in foster care, Ridge returned to the ER months later with another mysterious brain bleed and head swelling. This is Ridge's normal pediatrician, Dr. Jill Dickerson.
I've done this for 25 years. We've had kids that were shaken.
She understands why Ridge's injuries raise red flags, but says his medical history went ignored. Ridge was born premature with an abnormally large head, ringed by a strange bruise.
Did they ever ask to see Ridge's records from his time with you before making their decision?
They never called us. Defects never called us. There wasn't a lot of listening, and there certainly wasn't a lot of compassion. And I can say that from the notes, because I read every single note.
Dickerson says it was like doctors declared abuse, deemed him now safe, and then stopped running tests.
It's almost like we had an answer, that's it. So why would we keep looking? Let's move on.
Bailey says she had to take a video of Ridge having a seizure while in the hospital for them to believe something else was going wrong.
You have been practicing law for how long now?
23 years.
Attorney Therese Good remembers the first time she had to defend a case like the Collins.
I felt like everyone else does in many ways that, well, it's Children's Hospital. It's child abuse pediatricians. Of course they know what they're talking about.
But a colleague reviewing medical reports started raising questions, and they both started digging into exactly what the science could prove.
But what I do think is it doesn't necessarily come down to the fact that they're wrong. It's the fact that they're insufficient. So they're consistently relying upon the same people, the same records. They're not relying on a lot of these specialists who have had years in their fields.
Even if they do, 11 Alive has evidence that some specialists don't feel comfortable pushing back against a diagnosis of abuse. Good says some parents even have to fight defects for access to their child just to get that independent second medical opinion.
Science evolves. And I think that's part of the problem is that this area of law has not, and really of science, has not evolved. It stayed stagnant.
You know, I can't have access to what's happening in the juvenile system, but one of these indictments where a parent actually ended up facing criminal charges. And the list, I mean, of doctors, correct, from CHOA, is just, it's pages.
We see these crazy lists and we see how many, I mean, every single child abuse doctor at the Children's Hospital is on this, even though only one actually did the report.
I mean, this is just huge. I could see why, if I'm looking at this list, I would think, well, how could they be wrong?
Correct. You have the power of the state. This is powerful and frightening for a lot of attorneys that take these cases, myself included.
And you'll put up one, maybe two.
Correct.
I think there is this perception, though, that if a doctor is willing to take a look at a case, then they're probably more likely to say what you want to hear.
I think that's a false perception.
In April, a juvenile court judge ruled in the Collins case that defects had failed to prove its case. But the pending criminal charges mean Ridge still can't come home. District Attorney Herb Cranford has yet to say what he'll do, but in Georgia, he can take up to 7 years to figure it out. Their bond conditions allow them to spend time with their son, but only supervised. So Bailey and Ridge live with her parents, while Casey maintains their home.
We pray every day. We tell ourselves, maybe today will be the day. Maybe today will be the day.
Dr. Dickerson gets reports from all of the specialists Ridge now sees. She says none of them point to abuse in her professional opinion.
No, the more data we got, it's like, that doesn't make sense.
Right now, Dickerson believes Ridge has a blood disorder that keeps it from clotting the way it is supposed to, especially after being exposed to a viral infection.
His immune system overshoots one way and then it overshoots the other way.
She doesn't understand why the state is keeping the Collins apart.
You know, if defects is to protect the child, the best place for the child, especially in this case, is with his family at home. Can we just, let's be done and let's move on.
Attorney Therese Good says thankfully, most of the families she represents do eventually reunite. But it's an expensive fight. The Collins have already spent more than $100,000.
What I'm terrified about is these cases where attorneys don't have the knowledge, don't have the resources. They're appointed cases, they're families who don't have the knowledge and resources. I wonder how many of those kids don't go home. And that, if anything, is what keeps me up at night.
The stories always seem to start the same way. A concerning injury,
We noticed that he had a little bump on his abdomen,
which Holly Simonson says then leads to a trip to the hospital.
and literally within minutes of meeting me, there were basically outright accusations to my face.
Turns out parents in Georgia aren't the only ones fighting to be heard, because we didn't find Holly in Atlanta. We found her here. Parents have been lobbying lawmakers for years to get an independent second medical opinion before taking their children away.
That's why we hit the road to learn more about SB 1578, a piece of legislation that for the past 3 years has meant hope for families in Texas who say they're falsely accused of abuse.
They're the first to admit they understand completely that an investigation was needed. We are wanting due process, we're wanting better checks and balances, and the truth should always be the most important goal here for everybody.
Simonton says that search for truth started with families willing to speak up.
This incident has broken our trust in the healthcare system.
Just months after their nightmare, in 2021, she found herself testifying at the Capitol.
I was terrified. I actually wanted to back out as we were traveling to Austin.
But she had seen the power of a second opinion.
So our pediatrician said, looked over Hudson, he was fine. And she's like, we're not putting him through all that invasive abuse workup. And she was so fired up. And it meant the world to me, because without her, I don't know where we would be.
Because of that advocacy, the Simontons never lost custody. But other parents told lawmakers they weren't so lucky.
The CAP in our case never accepted our daughter's diagnoses and even went so far as to use our family's case as an example of abuse at a national conference without our permission.
That it didn't matter what we said, that he only listened to the child abuse doctors.
How long was the child out of your?
It was almost 2 years. I missed my son's first birthday.
It was that kind of testimony that helped win legislative allies like Representative James Frank, the chair of the Human Services Committee. When you first started talking about this issue, did you find that lawmakers were educated on it, or was there skepticism?
I think there was a lot of skepticism.
Frank says that's why lawmakers raise concerns with hospitals and child abuse pediatricians, or CAPS, more than a year before this committee meeting, expecting they would, on their own, make changes.
So any specific changes in the last couple of years?
Not that I can pinpoint.
That's honest, that's good.
He hoped those conversations would prompt hospitals to change their policies without the need for legislative action.
And I guess I am incredibly disappointed about the lack of process changes within the child abuse
at the children's hospitals in this case. I don't have any kids that young anymore, but unless their life depended on it, I would not take them to one of these places. I mean, I think we can make it better as legislators, but until the culture changes, I don't think it's going to be fixed.
Texas has 23 child abuse pediatricians, and Representative Frank believes the state should reconsider their role.
There's a big difference between calling CPS and saying, look, we're seeing some things that are unusual here. You probably ought to check. Versus calling CPS and saying, I have found child abuse, and in some cases, and I know which parent's doing it.
Frank says Texas has tried to train caseworkers within the state's child welfare agency to use CAP's information as an opinion, not the only opinion. But he knows that's hard when agency turnover leaves young caseworkers to make some pretty serious decisions. Almost 3 years after Texas tried to improve due process, Simonton says the law, as written, isn't enough.
A lot of parents don't even know they have a right to a second medical opinion. CPS isn't going to tell them that, and the child abuse pediatricians aren't going to tell them that. So parents don't know they have that right.
Which is why in the next legislative session, she hopes Texas lawmakers will debate how to make the intent of the law clear and enforce it.
I think you've seen in Georgia, and certainly we've seen here, there are plenty of times where they have created harm out of thin air when it just didn't need to be done.
Illinois is having similar discussions. Proposed legislation in that state mandates child abuse pediatricians identify themselves and their role, and it orders hospitals to provide parents with their child's complete medical record. As with Texas, those speaking out against the measure are primarily doctors and hospital staff.
I know when it comes to abuse, there's always the fear, what if we get it wrong?
I mean, that was my biggest fear.
Frank takes comfort that even though the number of children in the state continues to increase, child fatalities due to abuse and neglect have dropped. But the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services says there were 38 children who almost died due to abuse and trauma, also known as shaken baby syndrome. That number would include some of the families who say they are innocent, fighting to prove their child's injury is really connected to a bleeding or genetic disorder, trauma at birth, or seizure.
I don't know how anybody can look away from this, from what these families are going through.
Holly Simonton says after her experience, she created a Facebook group.
This was a shaken baby syndrome case.
To post the stories of parents who say they've been wrongly accused.
Are you finding in other states that parents are facing criminal charges the same way that they are in Georgia?
No. So Georgia cases are much more highly criminalized. In a lot of other states, the families go through the family court system, but it doesn't rise to the level of criminal charges. And the problem is when families get tied up in the criminal side of things, the cost goes up astronomically. And then those bond restrictions wears these families down.
Holly and her husband still get a bit nervous anytime their boys get injured. When Hudson broke his collarbone, her first thought was,
oh my goodness, thank God there are witnesses around. But we still panicked. Which hospital do we go to? We stopped in the parking lot and thought, are we putting our child in more danger by bringing them into this hospital?
Do you ever find that you have those moments where you read things like the Happy Mother's Day card and you think, I might not have had this gone a different way?
Yeah, all the time. Sorry. Yeah, I think I have survivor's guilt. We need the unaffected to come alongside of those of us who have been through it. I don't know how anybody can look away from this.
Hi, I'm Diana Ferber. I'm Carolyn Alexander. I'm Erica.
Most of these people have never met. They come from different backgrounds.
Yeah, I'm a business owner.
I used to work at Bristol as a server and manager.
I work for the city of Newton.
I am an upholsterer.
I'm an electrician.
Some can't hold a job because of the tragic twist that makes all of their differences disappear.
How many of you were accused of abuse after walking through the emergency room doors at Children's Healthcare? Just about everybody.
My son went unresponsive on August 11th, 2023. and he was life-flighted to Trevor Eggleston.
Bailey Collins and her husband were accused of shaking their baby, causing a brain bleed.
I lost it. I just lost it.
The reasons that brought these parents to Children's Healthcare vary.
I was actually sent to the emergency room by a pediatrician because I noticed a lump on her arm.
In our case, my daughter was 5 months old when we noticed some swelling on her leg.
So our whole situation was weight loss.
But once in the door,
You know, they were immediately like taking my 2-week-old daughter's clothes off, checking her for bruises and all of this.
They ran an x-ray and they found a fracture in her leg. And I broke down immediately because I know my daughter has never fallen, had any accidents, anything. And I know I'm an extraordinary mother. They said they would run some tests. It still hasn't crossed my mind that they would ever even try to take her away. I just assumed we would figure it out.
Everyone was whispering about us, like, I saw one of the nurses tap her friend and say, there they are, like, there's the parents.
I trust them. I just want to tell them every single detail. They use that to arrest me and say that I've abused my baby.
and within hours of that accusation, for many of these families,
We were there for no more than 2 hours, and they told us, they separated us, questioned us, and then told us that they were taking our son from us, and we were immediately escorted out of the hospital by police. And that was the last we saw him.
You haven't seen him since. And how long has that been?
3 years.
How many of you knew you were talking with a child abuse pediatrician when they were in the room asking you questions?
When we spoke to the child abuse pediatrician, we didn't know initially she was a cat. We found this out later once we got our medical records.
I actually didn't find out until we went to court.
Same.
Well, he didn't meet us in person. He called us on the phone.
well, parents understand it, want doctors and defects to protect children. They question how much they truly want to find out what's going on.
I wanted to get more follow-up x-rays. We kept asking and pushing for more follow-up x-rays and they wouldn't do it anymore.
Did they say why they wouldn't run those tests?
They just said there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong.
I came from Romania as an orphan. I was very tiny. Okay, maybe she got my genetics somehow. It was just like a slap to the face. Like, no, we're not going to listen to you because you're wrong.
After I got custody of our grandson, I went to all kinds of doctors. And one of the first places was Emory Genetics. He refused. He said, it's all right here in the computer. It's 100% use. I'm not doing any genetic testing. And I told him I was willing to pay for whatever. And he just flat refused.
Yes, I can attest to that too. You know, we've tried other options like Kaiser, Permanente, or as soon as they see what Joe has put in, it's like they don't even want to talk to you anymore. Their whole tone changes.
If you get a diagnosis, people don't believe it. The court system does not believe it.
Even if these families manage to get custody restored through juvenile court, many still have to fight criminal charges.
I'm facing a lot of charges right now for something I didn't do. I have 18 counts, 2 for each fracture. I'm facing 360 years in prison.
We won our juvenile court hearing and the court ruled in our favor for my son to be returned home. But since we're out on bond, we cannot be alone with him, so he's still living with my parents.
For 10 months, Tucky Willerat couldn't live or even talk to her husband.
I'm so lucky that I have friends who can pick me up from the jail and let me go home to them and sleep with them.
The time frame of first bringing your kid into the doctor to having them taken, less than 24 hours. And it takes almost 3 years to have them back home. How is that, a speedy trial? How is that allowable?
Who here has spent more than $25,000 trying to fight to get their kids back?
I even had to sell everything out of my lawn care business, taking that kind of hit.
We're $100,000. We have loans that we're paying back. We're barely making it.
These families say they are living proof something needs to change.
Protect your kids, protect yourself, learn your rights.
You need a lawyer to take your kid to the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we all part ways, I did want to give the Comrades a chance to give a quick update on their case as well. We did have the words on the screen there, but based off the story that aired, things have significantly changed. So pop up here real quick. And please, and it's just, Our criminal charges got dropped. And Rich was able to come home, and we haven't been separated since. I've been a stay-at-home mom, and we don't part ways, which is why he's here. And the Tim's family is going to be starting their trial Monday. So I'm not going to have them talk about their case because it's pending, but certainly if you are of the mind to keep someone in your prayers, I know that the Tim's family would greatly appreciate that. We have got the parents of Terrell and Alexander who were just in our group interview. Tyler is getting out
March 22nd.
and Carolyn in
September.
So they actually faced a conviction and were imprisoned based off of the verdict of the jury. So you see a lot of other faces here that were represented on screen. I encourage you guys to support one another, to share your stories with one another, and to take anything from here that you think is helpful and share it out in this big building so that we can continue to make a difference in our community. So, yes.
Something real quick, Rebecca, I'm sorry.
This is Spike. I'm sure most of you know that as well.
Yeah, for those who don't know, my name is Spike Cohen. I'm the founder and president of You Are the Power. Everyone here already probably knows that. First of all, thank you so much for this, for your reporting, for telling the stories of these families. That's worth its weight in, more than worth its weight in gold. Thank you. I'm going to keep this very short because there's nothing I can tell you that you don't already know. I don't have to tell you how evil it is to take children from innocent people based on essentially nothing. I don't have to tell you how insane it is to say that not only are you not innocent until proven guilty, not only are you not guilty until proven innocent, you're guilty and not allowed to prove that you're innocent because we're not even going to give you your medical records. But I am going to tell you what some of you may not know, which is why would these folks do this? It's because they get more money. I want to be very clear about this. The so-called child abuse pediatricians, which by the way is not an actual
specialty. They're just pediatricians. They're not like neurology or any kind of additional specialty. They're just pediatricians. They're pediatricians who know that their departments get more money the more time that they are accused of abuse. I'm sorry.
No,
He's right, though. He's right. They know that their departments get more funding the more times they call it abuse. And so do the caseworkers at DFACS, and so do the judges at the family court, and so do everyone down the pipeline. There's a phrase for taking someone's children against the rules for a monetary incentive. It's called child trafficking. They're doing it under the color of law, but I'm going to tell you something. In the Bible, it talks about God giving back the years that the locusts ate away. The locusts tried taking your children. Not only are you going to get your children back, you haven't already, not only are you going to get your children back, not only are we going to end this nightmare for you, not only are we going to push and get legislative changes to make it that this nightmare doesn't happen to any other family in this state, but then when we're done here, we're going to do it in Florida and in North Carolina and in Texas and in Maine and California and anywhere else that it's happening. We're not going to rest until it ends. I can't tell you why this happened to your individual families. I can only tell you that I am in this, we are in this with you, and not just your nightmare, but the nightmare of every other innocent family in this country. I love you. God bless you. Thank you for being a part of this. I'm sorry for why many of you have to be a part of this, but if we're going to do it, let's do it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And with that said, you may get out of this room that smells like onions. If you are a family member who has been impacted by this and are in our series, I'd love for us all to get a picture in the front of the Capitol, like over there by the stairs.